بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا. اللهم زدنا علما إنك أنت عليم الحكيم. اللهم اجعل هذه محاضرة حجة لنا لا حجة علينا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue in the book Umdat al-Ahkam. We started this a couple weeks ago. We had class yesterday. We're trying to make up for some time. So we want to kind of catch up on some of these ahadith, inshallah. So we're going to pick up where we left off that yesterday, inshallah. It was hadith عن جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في سفر. So this hadith, we mentioned this hadith yesterday, but we're going to cover it again briefly because it's linked to the next hadith that's after it. قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في سفر فرأى زحاما ورجلا قد ذلل عليه فقال ما هذا؟ قالوا صائما فقال ليس من البر الصوم في السفر ولمسلم عليكم برخصة الله التي رخص لكم. All right, in this hadith, we mentioned it yesterday. We'll mention it again. If you recall the hadith that came before that, it was talking about traveling, fasting while you're traveling, etc. In one case, some of the companions did look down on the other companions and vice versa, the ones that fasted and the ones that didn't fast. So here, we see where the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that there's no piety. And in another narration, we look up the explanation of this hadith. Many of the scholars say that here it means there's no obedience. There's no additional obedience to Allah by fasting when obviously you're not able to. So here it says, Laysa min al-birri as-sawmu fi safar. Like there's no additional obedience fasting while you are traveling if you're not able to fast or if it's going to bring some hardship upon yourself. Does that make sense? Right. And then the next part, and you find in Sahih Muslim where it says, Alaykum bi rukhsatillah. It is upon you to take the concessions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Right? So maybe you might not want to take that concession now, but there may be a time where you may want to exercise that concession based on your own personal limitations. Based on your own personal limitations. And what we mentioned yesterday is that every person has limitations that may not be similar to your brother or sister next to you. Some people may be able to do more things than you can. Right. The next hadith, and this is the first hadith we're going to start today, inshallah ta'ala, and we're going to try to cover quite a few hadith today. If you don't have the copy of the book is on the Facebook site, Umdat al-Ahkam, the book of fasting. We are on hadith number. If you're following in the English, we would be on hadith number 10. Yes, hadith number 10. Right. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله تعالى عنه قال كنا مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في السفر فمنا الصائم ومنا المفطر. All right, this hadith is also a detail. Pay attention to this hadith. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam and his companions, they were traveling. Some of them say in this particular hadith, they were traveling in a war. All right, there was a battle taking place here. So the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, they were together. So he says, Anas ibn Malik, he said, Kunna ma'a nabiyyi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam fi safar. He said, we were with the Prophet ﷺ during this expedition. They were in battle. And pay attention because this is an important caveat here. It says, فَمِنَّا الصَّائِمُ. And from us, some of us were fasting. وَمِنَّا الْمُفْتِرُ. And some of us were not fasting. This hadith is consistent with what we read previously, correct? This hadith is consistent with what we read previously. قال فنزلنا منزلا في يوم حار, at a particular place while we were traveling, and it was hot. وأكثرنا ظلا صاحب الكساء, and some of us, he said most of us, we were taking shade with our garments. What does that look like? So you look at the explanation of this hadith. They had clothing that was big, and they would take like piece of their clothing and cover themselves. And some of them would even mention that maybe they took their thobes off and hung it up so they can shield themselves from the sun. Now, obviously, they took their thobes off. They had the garments underneath, right? Like, they would take pieces of their garments and shield themselves from the sun. It says, فَمِنَّا مَنْ يَتَّقِيَ الشَّمْسَ بِيَدِهِ. And from them, there were some of the companions that didn't have garments that were bigger, so they would have to use their hand to block themselves from the sun like this. قَالَ فَسَقَطَ الصُّوَّامُ. And then they said eventually the ones that were fasting, they fell out. They couldn't stand anymore. They fell. وَقَامَ الْمُفْتِرُونَ. And then the ones that were not fasting, the ones that were muftir, the one that broke their fast, وَقَامَ الْمُفْتِرُونَ فَضَرَبُوا الْأَبْنِيَةَ. The ones that weren't fasting, they were able to build the tents for them to stay in. The ones that weren't fasting were able to establish the tents. وَسَقُوا الرِّكَابِ. And they were also able to, give nourishment to the camels and the animals that were with them. So what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ ذَهَبَ الْمُفْتِرُونَ الْيَوْمَ بِالْأَجْرِ. The ones that broke their fast, those were the ones that got the reward that day. Question. Does that mean that the ones that were fasting didn't get the reward for fasting because they fell out? La. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. So when we look at these ahadith, don't understand the opposite here. Don't understand that, hey, if you fall out, then you lose your reward of fasting. That's not it. But rather, it said that the muftirun, the ones that broke their fast, they got the reward on this day. Why do we think that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that in this particular part of this hadith? Anyone? Mumtaz. Go ahead. Mumtaz. Anyone else? Right. Right. Okay. Are you saying that as a principle in Islam, or are you just saying maybe that's why they did it? In this hadith here, we're talking about this hadith. In this hadith, it was Ramadan. Yeah, and they're traveling. Where do you get with if you fast in difficult? Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he mentioned in the previous hadith, لَيْسَ مِنَ بِرِّ الصَّوْمُ فِي السَّفَرِ. So what that means is there's no extra reward going through hardship if you're fasting. And this is the issue. And Nabi alayhi salatu salam, he wasn't given two options except that he chose aysarahuma, except that he will always choose the easiest of the affairs, right? So that's important. Here in this hadith, I just wanted to mention when the Prophet alayhi salatu salam, he said that the people, right, who broke their fast, they left with the reward. What is he talking about? So some of the scholars of Islam, there are quite a few statements as it relates to that, right? So the first thing, it says, قال ابن أبي صفورة. It says, أجر خدمة في الغزوة أعظم من أجر الصيام. He said that the ones who are being of service to the rest of the Muslims during a war, their reward is greater than the reward of the ones that are fasting during that time. قال إمام القرطبي. Imam al-Qurtubi, he says, أنهم لما قاموا بوظائف ذلك الوقت وما يحتاج إليه كان أجرهم على ذلك أكثر من أجر من صام ذلك اليوم. Imam al-Qurtubi, rahimahullah, he said that those who stood up to help build the tents, give drink to the animals, be of assistance to their brothers and sisters in Islam during that time, their brothers in Islam during that time, he said that their reward was more in that day than the ones that were fasting because they were able to be of service to other people. Now, here's the thing. Another thing that was mentioned about this, if a person fasts, their fasting only benefits who? Themselves. Whereas when these men, when they got up and built the tents, that benefited themselves and the rest of the Muslims. Like, also, another benefit we can get from that hadith, it shows the permissibility of fasting while you're traveling, as with all of the previous hadith that we covered. The next one. Next hadith. An Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha قالت كان يكون علي الصوم من رمضان فما استطيع أن أقضي إلا في الشعبان. طيب. This hadith of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she said that I used to fast, or I wasn't able to, كان يكون علي الصوم. So after Ramadan, she still had fast to make up. She had fast to make up from the month of Ramadan. She said, I wasn't able to make those fasts up until the month of Sha'ban. What month are we in right now? The month of Sha'ban. So that would make a person think that she didn't fast for the whole entire year up until Sha'ban. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Right. Some of the ulama, they say that it's hard to believe that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she went a whole entire year and didn't fast no sunans, no recommended fast. Right? Some of the scholars say it's hard to believe that she could have done that. So some of them say no. Rather, she probably fasted other times throughout the course of the year, but she didn't make up her obligatory fast until Ramadan. That makes sense? Yes or no? I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying this is some of the arguments. Another argument is they say that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, they say, well, why did she wait? So many ahadith and explanations, they say that because she was busy tending to the affairs of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But so one of them, an argument where that was, well, the Prophet alaihi wasallam had multiple wives. So the nights that he was not with her, she could have been fasting then. So that's another argument, right? Right. Another argument is that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, maybe she fasted, but she didn't make them all up, and she had a few days remaining before Ramadan came around again. The benefit of this hadith is to let everyone know, do not allow missed days of fasting to come up on the next Ramadan. Does that make sense? Like, what happens if a person, you have days? So what happens is you may have sisters, their men's come on Ramadan and they don't fast, but then they don't make that week up. or maybe it's 2 weeks. They don't make those two. However long it is, they don't make those days up. You have the whole year to make it up, but you don't make it up until when? Until the month of Sha'ban. You have until Sha'ban to make them up. If you don't make them up and it goes into the next Ramadan, what's upon her? Does anyone know? She still has to make those days up, but she can't make those days up in Ramadan, can she? No. So some of the ulama, they say that she has to make those days up, and for every day that she didn't make up, she has to feed someone as well. They don't necessarily mention during Ramadan, yes? Yeah, I would tell on. Somebody that's poor. Feed a poor person. Yep. During, yes. Yes, that's anybody. I just mentioned the woman because there are a lot of cases like that with sisters. And then that's a lot of detail too. Maybe we'll get into that later, inshallah. And this is if. Now, here's an issue with that. If she has an excuse, a legislative excuse for that, then she wouldn't have to feed. But if there is no excuse, maybe you're just lazy, maybe just you didn't get around to it, you were busy doing other stuff that are not, in other words, you were negligent with it, then that's when the person would have to feed. So then the benefit from this hadith that we gather is permissible to delay making up your days for fasting from Ramadan that you missed from the previous year, but you have up until the month of Sha'ban. You have up until Sha'ban. Like the next hadith. This hadith is also from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من مات وعليه صيام صام عنه وليه. All right. The next hadith of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha said, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من مات, whoever dies, وعليه صيام, and they have fast, they missed the fast, right? وَصَامَ عَنْهُ وَلِيُّهُ, then the person's wali will fast for them the days that they missed. Question, what is a wali? Listen, the hadith says, "Man mata wa alayhi siyam." The word "men" here, that means whoever passes away. So that means that would include a male and a female, right? It says, وَمَنْ مَاتَ وَعَلَيْهِ صِيَامٌ صَامَ عَنْهُ وَلِيُّهُ. What does it say in English? The heir. What does it say? No, is that what it says? It says heir. It says heir next to kin, or it just says next to kin? Which one you got? What does it say in yours? What's it say? And his heir should fast on his behalf. All right. Maybe he has a different one. But on his, maybe it says that. So here's the thing. Right. So if you say heir, then is heir a wali? Like, in this hadith, a wali is an heir. Meaning one who inherits from you. So the hadith, the wording in the hadith says wali yuhu. But in essence, it's not the wali that we think, rather it's an heir, a family member that is related to you. The next issue, من مات وعليه صيام صام عنه وليه. طيب. How many types of obligatory fasts are there? So we have Ramadan, that's one. What else? Huh? If make another. Another is number two. What's another? What is that? What's another? What's an oath? What does that look like? Like a swear. So what's an example of that? Does anyone know? What would be an example of that? Yes. I'm going to give you an example right now. If I get this new job, I'm going to pray Fajr in Masjid, whatever, for the next month. Every day. If I get this new job, by Allah, I'm going to pray Fajr at this particular Masjid. Or in this case, if this happens, I'm going to fast for 30 days. If I get this new job, I'm going to fast for 30 days. Okay. So then we have a fast on Ramadan. We have what else? A fast that's another. What other type of fast that could be obligatory? So you have a qada. You have to make up a fast, right? طيب. In this hadith, in particular, many of the scholars of Islam, they say that this hadith is specifically referring to a fast of another or oath. And there's a difference of opinion, but many scholars, particularly Imam Ahmed and others, they hold that this hadith is referring to another, meaning an oath. And we'll find out more about that later. The question now is, if a person makes an oath, do they have to fulfill that oath? Yes or no? Not, not. You, not. Listen. Save that question to the end. Just write that down and we'll come back to it. If a person makes an oath, do you have to fulfill that oath? Yes or no? Okay. So I have a question. What about before Islam? If a person made an oath before Islam, I'm going to do this, and you don't do it, do you have to fulfill that oath? Yes or no? So even as a non-Muslim, if they make an oath, they have to fulfill that too, or no? If a person, that's what I'm saying. If a person is a non-Muslim and they make an oath, and then they never do it, and then they take their shahada and become Muslim, do they have to fulfill that oath that they made before they became Muslim? You say no. Right. So I'm going to read a narration of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam, or rather, it says, another ilzam mukallaf mukhtar nafsuhu lak lillah. So another is when a person makes something obligatory for upon themselves for the sake of Allah. Does that make sense? So for example, if I get this job, I'm going to fast for a month. You place a type of worship upon yourself. Is that clear? Right. So then another is not correct unless it's from a person that has Islamic puberty. A person has the same mind, and etc. The question was, if a person is, before Islam they made an oath, and now they became Muslim, do they have to fulfill that oath that they made prior to Islam? In this hadith, وَلَوْ كَانَ كَافِرًا, even if a person was kafir, was a disbeliever, and then they accept Islam, but they made an oath when they were non-Muslim, this is due to the hadith of Umar ibn Khattab. During the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, it says, hadith li Umar, he says, inni kuntu nadartu fil jahiliyyah an a'taqifa laylatan. He said that when I was not Muslim, I made an oath that I would make i'tikaf for a night. So he went to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and said, do I have to fulfill that oath that I made before I was a Muslim? فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أوفي بأهدك, or أوفي بنذرك, يعني fulfill your oath that you made. Now, This is for when a person was a non-Muslim and they accepted Islam, then you still required to fulfill those oaths or those nadhrs that you made before Islam, as long as it was halal and it had to do with something that is worshiping of Allah. Is that clear? Right. The next hadith. The next part of the hadith, it says, وَأَخْرَجُوا أَبُو دَاوُودَ قَالَ هَذَا فِي النَّذْرِ وَهُوَ قَوْلَ أَحْمَدِ بن حنبل. Imam Ahmed, he mentioned that this hadith is only for another or an oath. And that part was, you could find in the Sunan of Abi Dawud. The Sunan of Abi Dawud. Right. Really quick, I just wanted to mention something about Abi Dawud really quick. How many people have heard of his Sunan? Yeah. Right. Books of Hadith. There are two main books of Hadith that everyone know, right? What are they? Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, Mumtaz. After those two books, and there are 4 books of Sunan. From those 4 books of Sunan, the top from among them are, what are they? Sunan Abi Dawud, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nisa'i, and Ibn Majah. Okay? Right now, and I'm going to mention a small thing from Imam Abi Dawud in the Sunan Abi Dawud. Abi Dawud, he wrote 5,000 hadith. 500,000 hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. How many ahadith did Abi Dawud write? 500,000 hadith from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. From those 500,000 hadith, he compiled and he accepted, or he took from them 4,800 hadith. From those 500,000 hadith that Abi Dawud put together, he only kept 4,800 of them. From those 4,800 hadith, he said Islam comprises of 4 hadith. All of Islam comprises of 4 hadith. The reason why I want to mention that, because I think it's very important. These 4 hadith are hadith that every Muslim should live by. Out of 4,000, listen to this. He compiled 4,800 hadith. And from those 4,800 hadith, he said there are 4 hadith that every Muslim should live by. In other words, Islam comprises of these 4 hadith. The first hadith, and I want you guys to write this down. Just keep this with you at all times. The first hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are judged by their intentions. Actions are judged by their intentions. That's the first hadith. The second hadith, مِنْ حُسْنِ إِسْلَامِ الْمَرْءِ تَرْكُهُ مَا لَا يَعْنِيهِ. From the good Islam of a person is to leave off affairs that don't concern him. From the good Islam of a person is to leave off issues that do not concern him. Number 3, لا يكون مؤمن مؤمنا حتى يرضى لأخيه ما يرضاه لنفسه. The next hadith is, you will not be a believer, a true believer, until you love with your brother. You love for your brother that which you love for yourself. And the last one, إن الحلال بين وأن الحرام بين. That the things that are halal are clear and the things that are haram are clear. And these are summarizing these ahadith, but most people should be familiar with them, inshallah ta'ala. The next hadith. عن عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال جاء رجل إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا رسول الله إن أمي ماتت وعليها صوم شهر أفأقضيه عنها فقال لو كان على أمك دين أكنت قاضيه عنها قال نعم قال فدين الله أحق أن يقضى. In this hadith, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he said, a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, O Messenger of Allah, inna ummi matat. He said, my mother passed away. In this hadith, he said, my mother passed away, and alayha som shahar, and she had a whole month worth of fasting that she did not complete. She had a month of fasting that she did not complete. So a person is going to think, when you hear a month of fasting, what's the first thing that's going to come to mind? What type of fast? Ramadan. Sah? But if you look up the explanation of this hadith, rather, she made another to fast for a month. And she died before she could do it. She made an oath to fast for a month, and she was not able to fulfill it. So in the hadith, it says, Inna ummi mata. He said, my mother passed away. Wa alayha soma shahar. And she had a month that she was supposed to fast that she didn't survive to fast it. So he says, Afa aqdihi anha. Can I fast for my mother? Can I fast the days that my mother missed from the oath? Can I fast them? So the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Walau kana ala ummika daynun. So the Prophet ﷺ is comparing a debt. Comparing a debt, meaning money to the days that she owed in terms of fasting to Allah or for Allah. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. The scholars of Islam say that this hadith shows the proof or evidence to show that we can use analytical deduction in Islam, meaning qiyas. For those of you that have studied some of our fiqh classes, I'm sure you've heard the term qiyas, etc., and we translate that to mean analytical deduction. And someone may say, well, what's the evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah to support it? Many of the ulama use this particular hadith to show the evidence that this is also a form of evidence in the religion, meaning dalil. So we get back to this. So the Prophet, he said to the Prophet ﷺ, can I fast for the days that my mother missed from an oath that she made? So the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, if your mother had debt, meaning if she owed someone money, would you not pay that money after she passed away? The answer to that would be the answer to the other part about fasting. Do you understand? And then the Prophet ﷺ said the rights of Allah take precedence over anything else. Is that clear? That's how we understand that hadith. Any questions about that? The next part. In another narration, وفي رواية جاءت امرأة إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقالت يا رسول الله إن أمي ماتت وعليها صوم النظر أفأصوم عنها فقال أرأيت لو كان على أمك دين فقضيته أكان ذلك يؤدي عنها قالت نعم قال فصومي عن أمك. And this next hadith here, the same thing. However, both of these ahadith are not the same people. Both of these ahadith are not the same people. In this particular hadith, a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she said, O Messenger of Allah, my mother passed away, and alayha som another. She made an oath that she didn't fulfill. Afa asumu anha, can I fast for her? Faqala, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if your mother had a debt, he used the same analogy. If your mother had a debt, wouldn't you pay that debt? And she said, yes. He said, then fast for your mother then, because that fast was a what? A debt. So to understand something, if we make an oath Islamically, though, and that obviously the oath that you make is halal, it has some type of worship, then that becomes obligatory for you. And if you pass away, then that responsibility goes to your wali or your family. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Which word? Nadar. Na na ni manin. Noon that ra. Nadara. طيب. The next hadith. عن سهل ابن سعد الساعدي رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يزال الناس بخير ما عجلوا الفطر. طيب. Pay attention to this hadith right here. In this hadith, first of all, we're gonna mention one thing about the narrator. An Sahal ibn Sa'ad as-Sa'idi, the one who narrated this hadith, his name was Sahal ibn Sa'ad. Like, his name, now this also shows the permissibility of changing names. His name before that was Haznun or Hazanan. And now the Huzn is like sadness. His name was sad, right? فَسَمَّاهُ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ سَهْلًا. So the Prophet ﷺ, he named him Sahal. He named him Sahal. A benefit about this particular narrator, his name was Sahal ibn Sa'ad as-Sa'idi. I hope you guys write that down. Sahal ibn Sa'ad as-Sa'idi. This person, he died in the year 91. And some say he died in the year 88 after the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. And they say that the Sahabi Sahal was the last of all the companions that passed away in Medina. He was the last one of all the companions that passed away in Al-Medina. قال ابن سعد بلا خلاف وكان عمره يومئذ 96 سنة كيل 100 سنة. They say that there's no difference of opinion about that. Rather, they say that he was 96 years old when he passed, and some even say perhaps he was 100. At any event, he was the last. This may be a trick a question in a quiz sometime. Who was the last companion alive? Who was the last companion that died? And that was Sahal. Sahal ibn Sa'ad. Right, back to the hadith. And the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam قال لا يزال ناس بخير. People will continue to be upon goodness ما عجلوا الفطر. That you're quick when breaking your fast. What does that mean? When it's time to break your fast, you don't delay breaking your fast, you break your fast. However, this is after you are certain that it's time to break the fast. Does that make sense? Meaning you're not going to sit and be like, all right, well, I think it's time. I'm just break my fast. Sticking to this hadith. Rather, it means to taharri. Make sure that it's time to break the fast. And there's a lot of kalam, a lot of speech about that, but we're not going to get into that due to the time and due to the number of ahadith we have to cover, inshallah. I'm going to mention this. وَيُسَنُّ أَن يَدْعُوا عِنْدَ فَطْرِهِ. There's a dua that a person should make when they are breaking their fast. وَحَسَّنَهُ مِنْ حَدِيثِ أَبِي هُرَيْرَةَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى عَنْهُ مَرْفُوعًا. And goes back to the Prophet ﷺ. ثَلَاثَةٌ لَا تُرَدُّ دَعْوَتُهُمْ. There are three people that their dua will never be rejected or will not be rejected. Who are these people? Al-Imam al-Adilu, a righteous imam. Here they're not talking about the imam of a masjid. They're talking about imam, leader of the Muslims. Al-Imam al-Adilu. That's number one. Number two, as-Sa'imu hina yuftiru. Meaning the one that is fasting up until the time that he breaks his fast. So for example, right now you're getting ready to break your fast and you make dua before you break your fast. The third one is da'watul mazlum, the dua of the one that is oppressed. The dua of the one that is oppressed. Right. Next hadith. عن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أقبل الليل منها هنا وأدبر النهار منها هنا فقد أفطر الصائم. And this hadith was reported by Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He said that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, إذا أقبل الليل منها هنا. You don't have no more? All right, then we'll stop there then. You have it? That was the last one? All right, we'll stop with that, inshallah. I wanted to, let me see something. All right, we're going to stop right there. I wanted to cover something else. Dealing with, a question came about a hadith that we covered yesterday. The hadith that we covered yesterday had to do with a kafarata fi jima'. So say, for example, a man and a woman, a man has intercourse with his spouse during the daytime in Ramadan. Are you guys with me? We covered that hadith yesterday, right? Okay, good. The question now was, what about the woman? Does she have to do the same obligations as the man, or is it just for the man? You would believe. That's cool. I get it. Oh, you certain? MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Okay. So the same rules apply to her as with the husband. So you with him. So y'all together. It don't differentiate. So you say it do. What that got to do with her being intimate with her husband in the daytime in Ramadan? What about you, Sheikh? What you say? So it's not the same. How many brothers married in here? You say you be married on Saturday? Inshallah. Allah yuwafiq. Yes. We talking in general. We ain't say force, no force. We're saying in general. All right. So right now there's a whole research about this topic. We're gonna cover that really quick. Like, so the ulama of the past, they say, من جامعها زوجها في النهار رمضان فلا تخلو من حالين. If a person is intimate with his spouse, and I need you guys to pay attention. If a person is intimate with his spouse during the daytime of Ramadan, there are two conditions. There are two ways to look at it. The first one, أن تكون المرأة حال الجماع معذورة. That a woman, while she's being intimate, she has an excuse. What would be her excuse? بإقرار أو نسيان أو جهل بتحريم الجماع في نهار رمضان. So those three. So the first thing is, if her excuse would be she was forced to be intimate, like the Sheikh said, or now this force could be rape or whatever the case may be, right? She was forced to be intimate, she forgot, or she didn't know the ruling of having intercourse in the daytime of Ramadan. Some men might think, women might think, well, I'm fasting, mean I'm not eating. That doesn't mean I can't have sex. Some people really may understand that to be the case. طيب. ففي هذه الحال صومها صحيح. They say in this case her fasting is correct. ولا يلزمها القضاء ولا كفارة. And if that's the case, she doesn't have to make it up and she doesn't have to pay a penalty. In that case. وهي رواية عن Imam Ahmed. And this is a position, one of the positions of Imam Ahmed, and there's also the position of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and some modern day scholars that also hold this position would be like Shaykh Uthaymeen and Shaykh bin Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala. The evidence that they use As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. That's the first piece of. Now notice, when the ulama mentioned dalil to support a position, usually what they would mention first is an ayah, then a hadith, then maybe ijma, and then they mention some of the companions, etc., etc. That's usually how they break down evidence when it comes to stating a particular position. So the first thing they mentioned was the ayah. The second thing, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من كان ناسيا وهو صائم فليتم صومه فإنما أطعمه الله وسقاه. This is the hadith that we mentioned yesterday. He said, whoever eats out of forgetfulness and they're fasting, then they are to continue their fast. Indeed, Allah fed them and gave them drink. And this hadith was reported in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Yesterday, when I mentioned this hadith, there's a large group of ulama that hold the position that intercourse does not fit into that. But here in this particular case, some ulama consider that to be okay. Some. طيب. The next one, it says وقال الجماع والسائر المفطرات تقاس على أكل وشرب. They say that intercourse in anything that breaks your fast, you can compare it to eating and drinking, meaning it takes the same ruling. In another narration, عن أبي ذر الغفاري رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله تجاوز عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكره عليه. In this hadith, the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has excused his ummah for mistakes, forgetfulness, and things that they are forced to do. And things that they are forced to do. So then, that's the first part. He says, فَإِنْ كَانَتْ مُكْرِهَا فَلَا شَيْءَ عَلَيْهَا وَصَوْمُهَا صَحِيحٌ. If she is, according to Sheikh bin Baz, if she is forced to have intercourse, then her fasting is okay. And likewise, Sheikh Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala, he also holds a similar position. إذا كانت المرأة معذورة بالجهل أو نسيان أو إكراه فلا قضاء عليها ولا كفارة. Sheikh Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala says the same thing. If the woman has an excuse out of ignorance, meaning she doesn't know the ruling, forgetfulness, or she's forced to, then in this case, she doesn't have to make the day up. Her fast is correct, and she also does not have to pay a penalty. The next part. Al-Hal al-Thaniya, the second condition. أن تكون المرأة غير معذورة. A woman, she doesn't have an excuse. بل مطاوعة لزوجها في الجماع. Rather, she's okay with her husband being intimate with her during the daytime of Ramadan. She wanted it the way he wanted it. ففي وجوب الكفارة عليها في هذه الحال. Then it is obligatory for her to pay the penalty just like the husband. في هذه الحال خلاف بين العلماء على قولين. In this particular case, the scholars differ. In this particular case, the scholars differ. The first position, أنه يجب عليها القضاء, that it is wajib for her to make her fast up, and she has to pay the penalty if she was with it, meaning she wanted to be intimate with her husband as well. And this is the position of the majority of the scholars of Al-Islam. The majority of the scholars of Al-Islam. And there's a lot of evidence to support it. We'll mention just one hadith. We can find in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam أمر رجل الذي جاء مع امرأته في النهار رمضان بالكفارة. That in this hadith that we mentioned yesterday, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he commanded the man who had intercourse with his wife in the daytime to pay the penalty. So they say the origin is that any ruling that come out, it automatically encompasses the woman and the man together. There's no distinction between them in general. طيب. And then we're going to mention the next position. أن الكفارة تلزم الزوج خاص عن نفسه فقط ولا شيء على المرأة سواء كانت makruha or mutawa'a. And the next position is that the penalty that has to be paid, this is only for the husband by himself only. And there's nothing upon the woman, whether she was forced to be intimate or she was with being intimate. And this is the position of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, and this is another position of Imam Ahmed. And the evidence they use to support that was تدل بأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أمر رجل بالكفارة. The same hadith from yesterday, they use the same hadith to show the difference of opinion. And this next part of the hadith, if you recall, we just mentioned that in general, if a ruling comes down, it includes the man and the woman. That's in general, right? Okay. In this position here, they say, okay, the Prophet ﷺ commanded the man with fasting and freeing a slave, etc. وَلَمْ يَذْكَرْ عَلَى الْمَرْأَةِ كَفَارَةً. And it wasn't mentioned about the woman. Okay? And what they use to support that position is a principle in Islam. That principle is لا يجوز تأخير البيان عن وقت الحاجة. لا يجوز تأخير البيان عن وقت الحاجة. That means it is not permissible to delay clarifying something in the time of necessity. That's a principle in Islam. لا يجوز تأخير البيان عن وقت الحاجة. It's not permissible to delay clarifying a ruling in its time of necessity. So what does that look like here? The Prophet ﷺ was talking to this man. They're saying if it was obligatory for the woman as well, then why didn't the Prophet ﷺ mention as well as your wife as well? This includes your wife as well. The opponents of that, they say, the Prophet ﷺ answered the question that came to him, meaning it came from that man, so he answered that man. Allahu A'lam. The moral of the story is that there's a difference of opinion on this issue. The difference of opinion is that there are how many ways of looking at it? What are they? If a woman is forced, then they say there's nothing upon her if she is forced. Huh? Yeah, if she's forced, forgot, and ignorant of the ruling, then the evidence says that there's nothing upon her. If she's mutawa'a, meaning she wanted to do it, then there's two ways of looking at it. Way number one is she's just like the husband. Whatever the husband had to do, then she has to do. And way number two is it's not upon her, rather it's just for the husband. Is that clear? Yes. Yes. The point is there's a difference of opinion on this. So when you look at us, when you ask a question like, well, what's the position on it? You have different ways of looking at it. Me personally, I'm not in that position. But if I was, I would. So there's something that one of our mashayikh taught us, and I want to tell you, one of our mashayikh taught us something a long time ago when it came to issues like this, right? So he says, "Khuruj min al-khilaf awla." Staying away from differences of opinion is better. So if that was my situation, I would make her fast too. Or whatever the case. If we got a bunch of slaves, you need to free one too. It's on both of us. Right? Why is that? Why would you want in a case like that, why would you want to let it slide and then, down the road you found out, or on the Yom Al-Qiyamah, you found out that you dropped the ball, you were supposed to do that and you didn't. Right? So in a case like that, ihtiyatan, to be safe, I would just the same thing. Free a slave, fast 2 months consecutively, or feed 60 poor people. Khalas, any questions? Fadl. Huh? No, not before. I mean, I was just all of it. Go ahead. During when? Before Fajr? Okay. While you're being intimate and the adhan goes off? What's your question? Truth, your sheikh. I go like sheikh. I'm going to tell you something. If you're being intimate with your wife and they call you then while you're being intimate with your wife, you lost khalas, you lost your fast and shit. You fall into this category. Even if Ramadan came in for 1 minute and you're still there in that position, now if you stop before the adhan, you good. Once the adhan goes off, khalas. And Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, what did he say? Kulu washrabu hatta. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, eat and drink until the white becomes clear from the dark. Yes. We talking about food, or we talking about being intimate? Yeah, but we're not talking about that right now. I'm telling you, me personally, I would stay away from it, or I would make sure I would make sure I'm not in that situation, and Allah knows best. Allahu alam, Allahu alam, Allahu alam, Sheikh. I would stay away from it, man. Me personally, I would stay away from it. Sheikh, I was just looking at the time like, no, that's close. I'm not gonna play myself. I don't know why you would. I mean, I mean, for real, like, it's Ramadan. Like, why would you even put yourself in that position? Sheikh, you need to run out the crib, man. Get ready to go to the bed shit. I'm just saying, I wouldn't. I'm really telling you, you gotta look at the clock, man. I understand what you're saying. No, I will stay away from it though. Yes. Allahu alam. I will stay away from it. Meaning, I would make sure whatever you need to do for. Me personally, I would consider myself to be fall into this hadith. Me personally. But Allahu alam. Yes. Allahu alam. We'll get back to that. No, they gotta be Muslim. Yes, it should be a Muslim. Anytime in Islam when it talks about giving zakat and etc., 9 out of 10 times it has to be a Muslim. The only time where you'll find it's permissible to give even zakat, for example, to non-Muslims is under the concept of mu'allafatu qulubihim. Mu'allafatu qulubihim, it speaks about people who, let's say for example, there's a group of people who oppress the Muslims here locally, for example. Maybe you got bullies in your neighborhood. They beat up all the Muslims, right? Mu'allafatu qulubihim is that the Muslims come together and say, hey, look, let's give our zakat to this person, khaffa darrahum, to lessen the harm that they're putting on us. We're going to give them some, basically you paying them. You paying them so that they don't harm you, right? This is from mu'allafatu qulubihim, to soften their hearts towards you. You get them some bread or whatever the case may be. That's it. In general, now giving charity to non-Muslims is no problem. Like to help non-Muslims who need stuff is no problem. But for your specific religious duty-wise, meaning if you have to break a fast, you have to feed somebody from your deen, like it's a penalty, then those are for the Muslims. Is that clear? Khalas, we're going to stop with that, inshallah. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.